this actually a lot in working with kids and parents. Oftentimes there is a common a concern that comes up that basically goes to the effect of, if we talk about suicide, am I giving my kid, am I putting ideas in their head about it? Especially if the kid is already struggling with depression or any other difficulties. And I think part of what I wanted to address with talking about this book is the fact that that is not the case. Research absolutely shows that, in fact, it has the opposite effect. It's by bringing up a conversation around suicide, you're never going to push a child into now thinking about committing suicide if they weren't already considering it. So I do appreciate the fact that I think Emily really, the author, really put emphasis on wanting to really revolve an entire novel around exposing something that, stigma has kept us from really being able to talk about openly.
So something you said earlier is that reading a book about suicide for a kid who wasn't already thinking about suicide is not going to put it in their head. But then I'm thinking, as a teacher, if I'm teaching this to my 125 8th graders, like statistically, at least one of those students has had suicidal thoughts before, right? So, and I might not know who that student is, but statistically I know that at least one or probably more of my students has thought about it before. How do you think about a student or a young person who has thought about suicide then reading a book where suicide is addressed?
So there's a few different parts to that question. The first thing that came to mind is, just as you'll see in any area of mental health, it's not a black and white issue. It's not a issue of somebody who's completely, not thinking about it, healthy-minded, and then somebody who is suicidal. There is a complete spectrum of in between. So even if you're not necessarily reaching we're talking about, yes, there's going to be some that have suicidal thoughts, but there's different degrees of that. There are some that might be thinking about self-harming, and self-harming comes in a lot of different ways, including addiction, including eating disorders. So there's different variations or different flavors of that could still get targeted through the conversation, even if they are not somebody who would think of themselves as somebody who would go through with that. They might be at a stage where they're still exploring with self-harming behaviors. So there's that piece.
Would you recommend a student who is exploring with self-harming, would you recommend they read this book? Yeah, tell me more about that.
So I think what it does when you read something and it is relatable to you is there's a feeling of hope. There's a feeling of hope that you often is associated with being able to relate to somebody. And what you will find is probably the biggest indicator of somebody going through with suicide or an attempt at suicide is a feeling of hopelessness. And so you're automatically targeting the one major indicator of somebody doing that just by reading another story about somebody who's doing it.